Well, hello everyone. I'm in a pretty good mood today for October the 4th, 2024. I am Delbridge, Benchmark Realty, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I will eventually get the right direction with that. I'm pretty excited this morning. We've got some pretty good news, although social media and other people are already crying and saying, well, look, at rates are probably going to go back up after they just went up a little bit last month, and they were saying, oh, that's fine, we expected them to go up. I don't know that we did. But before we get into the real business of the business, we got to talk a little football, because golly gee whiz, it's that great time of year. We got SEC football, and we got some kind of team up in Nashville Titans, although without Derrick Henry. Oh, by the way, Derrick Henry had a pretty good game this week, although the stats aren't doing real great, but Derrick Henry looked pretty good. And man, I wish I could run like he did. I wish I could run like he did on my best day, on his worst day. We saw a game I didn't really enjoy, to be honest with you. The Georgia game, Alabama game, I was kind of enjoying it when we were in a comfortable lead. But when it got real close at the end, that is just too much football for me. Now, the Tennessee Volunteers have Arkansas this week, and we'll hope that we'll have a competitive game of some sort there. I'm not a big fan of running the score up for humiliation purposes, or some people call style purposes. And we do have Vanderbilt facing Alabama, who just beat the #1 team in the country according to many polls. And I would like to see if the team gets ahead, that we continue the general practice of putting the younger guys in after it's, quote, in hand, to let them get some experience and some play and some action. They have families, and I'm sure their moms and dads would be just chuffed to see their son playing in an Alabama game as a freshman. I think that's good. I don't know that style points necessarily matter. You know, sometimes the freshmen just run them up, even though they're freshmen, so I can't stop all that, but it is what it is. Anyway, I think we got some good news this morning, and I want to talk about that. But I also want to talk about some real issues of, are we making genuine progress? I want to go back to some previous shows real quick. So let's get to it. If you like this content, please go to CallDelToSell.com, find the tab that says on YouTube, click it, and it'll open up a page of QR codes. There you can use a smartphone to scan and get to the YouTube page, or you can just mouse over and click it on a PC. There you'll be able to subscribe to this little button over here and click the notification bell so that YouTube will notify you when each Friday's blog has been uploaded. Thank you. All right, I have some stuff pulled up here. They're just 2 tabs. I don't want to take too much time. Don't want to take too much of your time. I don't want to go too deep. I don't want to ruin my feeling that things are actually going pretty good when we got a couple of curveballs thrown to us last week. So let's start out here with the Bureau of Labor Statistics. This second tab is also the BLS, but we're going to look at something else. Now we're going to look at the current employment statistics. I like to call this the current employment situation, because I think that's better than statistics, because I like to think about it more in terms of people than raw numbers. But anyway, each month it talks about this, about the business. This is the establishment survey, and we also will have in the household survey in the CPI. So they are taking a lot of data in. So let's zoom in on that a little bit. And it talks about the 119,000 businesses. Remember, these are just samples. And they do point out that they represent over 500,000 individual work sites, not necessarily people. There'll be more than one person per work site, I'm sure. So we look over here at our typical, and it always brings up the flag, but we look at the areas, according to the list, where we're seeing employment. Now we see professional and business services that we've seen in the past have been actually being down. They've actually been revised down, and we show them that they're positive, with the confidence interval being a little bit low there, but it's not real huge. We don't want to see professional business services go down, but where we see the biggest gains are actually in service providing, total private, and total non-farm. Now, if we want to compare this interval here from this point to this point, the highs to the low, that's a pretty wide spread. And the government does, this one maybe a little bit more worse at it, I guess you would say, at this time than maybe some of the other administrations. But I think it's fair to say that governments in general like to give you a nice thing in the front, and then once you've forgotten about it, revise the numbers down a little bit. Occasionally they'll rise them up, as we saw with the White House press release this week, saying that real incomes actually rose a whole lot more than we thought they were. And so at that point, I have a difficulty believing that they rose that much to the good if we're seeing other things being revised to the not quite as good. So I do want to look at the 3-month just to see how we're doing. And we see that in technical sense, we are coming down. Here we see in the 3 months, which should be more accurate since they've done their revisions. And they do show that these three same areas are higher. They're around 500,000 with that interval being above and below that. But kind of put an eyeball to those three dots and you'll see around 500,000. Now we go back to this last month for September, we see that we're down about 254, and we'll look at that. Matter of fact, there we see our 254 on the top line. But what I want to get to is this right here. Real average hourly earnings for all employees increased 0.2% in August. At least it's increasing. And I know 0.2% isn't a lot, but what worries me about our third quarter pivot that we did is we pivoted when the Fed did so. They did so at twice what was long expected, and most of the reputable economists thought we should do a quarter. Partially because we don't want to spook the equities market, plus we don't want to reignite inflation. Inflation is really the bigger, badder wolf in this case, I think, because everyone has to buy food. Even if you're a minor, you have to have your guardians take care of that. So it affects you. Now you also work into housing and everything else, but when you look at it, income is critical to everyone. And if your dollar is dying, we need to stop that bleeding first, because even if you can't buy a house today, you do have to still rent, and that's a big issue. Housing or renter or owner's equivalent of rents is a big issue in the CPI. I don't think we're going to dig into that deeply, but I do want to look here just briefly at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the CPI home. This is where we are, because I want to look at August CPI. And it says that we went up 0.2%. Shelter is up. So we still have an issue with the cost of housing going up as the main component, as it has been for a while. But we see that the CPI, if we can trust how they calculate the CPI, it shows that it directly matched what the wages did, that the earnings increased by exactly the same amount. Now, I am very grateful that we didn't have the other way around, in a sense that we have the CPI outpacing the wages, but the way they've got it shown, BLS, is that they are perfectly matching each other. So we're not making gains, and I would like to see us make some gains. And we might need to slow the economy a little bit more in order to see our wages begin to outpace our inflation. It wouldn't hurt to have a little deflation in a few areas that got so high to start with. Even if they came down, they wouldn't come down to where they were before all this madness began. So I think that we're making progress, and that's good. Now, when we look at this, we do see that we're still in the positive in this area. We see some are right on the line, that they're not growing much, but that's what we've seen for a long period of time. So I don't really see that employment has changed a lot, and we'll go into the news release here in just a second, and they'll tell us basically, yes, it hasn't really changed a whole lot. And I like that. At least we're not losing jobs and people having extra burden put on them. If you think it's tough with inflation to pay your bills, try to pay your bills with no job. Every one of these statistics is a person. Now, maybe you're doing real well, consider yourself blessed, and together we'll get through this tough period, and hopefully we'll get a change going here in just a little while, just a few months. Now, employment payroll, let's look at this news release. And unfortunately with the BLS, it's always hard to read their pages because the left justify them, so it makes it harder to capture them. But it says that non-farm payroll employment increased by 254,000. That's good. And they're going to say right here that that unemployment changed little at 4.1%. So we're not setting off unemployment with the double of the rate cut that we saw last week or so. Now the BLS, it also says down here that we have from the household survey. Remember, this is measuring things a little bit different than the establishment survey, which is businesses versus the household, and the mixture is a little bit different as well. It says we got the 4.1%, and we had 6.8 million unemployed people. Change little. I like to hear the word change little, although I hope I'm not playing into anyone's psychology. And the jobless rate was at 3.8%. Now, when we go back and look at the number of people jobless less than 5 weeks, decreased by 322,000. So there's two ways we can look at it. I'm going to take it on the positive side without digging any deeper, that we're having fewer people kind of in that initial stages of joblessness, rather than thinking, well, now we just have more people unemployed longer. It looks like the unemployment is not yet a problem, so that should not spur aggressive rate cuts this next go around, because we know that when the Fed starts cutting rates, historically it's been in a panic, and that causes the stock market to get shaky. But as long as they think that things are at least even keel, people tend to hold on to their employees because they don't want to shed them until they have to. So I like that part of it. I think that sounds encouraging to me. Now we go down here. I think we don't want to take too much time here because our show will be long, and I don't know that we're getting that much benefit if we go super long. Total non-farm payrolls increased by 254,000. This is the establishment version of this. Healthcare, let's look at where we're putting jobs on, because we do have some things you want to watch here. Healthcare added 45,000 jobs in September, below the average monthly gain of 57,000. So that's not good, but it's not too far off. And we want to look down here at employees in government continued its upward trend in September. Well, I don't like to see more government, being that they produce no income of their own. They only take in the form of taxes or debt. So we're still expanding government during this period of time. And we see that it continued to trend up in local government as well. So it's sort of that double whammy. State government. So we have each of these from this situation kicking in here. Now we want to look at construction, because I noticed a difference in trend. Construction employment continued to trend up in September by 25,000. Well, here we see that we increased government jobs by, where are we? Here we are, 31,000. We see that we increased healthcare by 45,000. There we go. So we're still putting the jobs in places other than building houses and businesses and bridges and all of the other stuff that we need. I would rather see a little bit more positive movement in construction and a little less in government, but that's just me. So I think that's pretty much what we want to look at. There is something down here I want to talk about, the work week and wages, and here it is. The average work week for all employees on private non-farm payrolls edged down by 1/10 of an hour, which is not a lot, but it is a reduction of hours, to 34.2 hours in September. So it doesn't look like we're at a full 40-hour week. Manufacturing averaged at 40 hours. Now, overtime edged down as well, so we're not working over the employees we do have overtime as much, and we're not working as long a work weeks. So that's not such a great thing. Now, if we want to look at the CPI, because we didn't specifically look at the CPI when it has come out, but I want to talk about this one thing, which could be a potential threat we want to keep an eye on. Doesn't mean anything bad's happening yet, but it does have an effect on inflation, because we just saw earlier that we perfectly matched wages increasing at the same rate that the CPI increasing. If we can believe our numbers, and if we can believe we have an accurate measurement of inflation with the CPI, then it shows we're not gaining ground. But the other side of that coin is we didn't lose ground. in September. But here's what I want to point out. Most of the total, because this is what it's saying, all urban consumers 0.2% seasonally adjusted. This is all of the CPI, including energy, and energy was significantly down. It was giving us this sense that we were going to have perhaps a fall in demand, and so they were going to maybe be producing more energy than we had buyers for, and it becomes less scarce, and so the price would come down, and we like that because it goes into inputs. Now, this is an issue. This helped us a great deal break even, I think, and that's part of what we want to think about. It's nothing is ever totally terribly bad or terribly wonderful either. It's always a mixture of everything, and we've got to go in level-headed. Already this morning, the salesmen types that were saying that last week's easing up on mortgage rates was expected, and I would say it doesn't make sense to me, because if since December of last year we're expecting a quarter point in Q3, and that Q3 gets here, very grateful we finally made that pivot to start lowering those rates down, because we need a little bit lower mortgage. I would say most of us do, but they doubled it. So all of the talk about how it was baked in, and then they got 50 basis points and it went the other direction, and people were making excuses, trying to explain it away why it eased up. It didn't go up much, but a little bit. Now those same people that got a little bit embarrassed that I see in social media are now saying rates are rising again. Expect them to load. And I don't know that they necessarily will. It's a different entity from the stock market, and they're not pinned to the Fed. The Fed's cost of money gives them an idea of where our economy is going, but it doesn't correlate to that. It's just the question, how much confidence do people have on the speed at which the rates from the Fed will taper down and the economic activity? I think that the lowering of the rates by the Fed generally is a negative sign for that. But I also don't want to see inflation get back up, because we're still struggling with that in many areas. Even if we don't have money supply issues causing things to cost more, on the news is a potential avian flu outbreak, which could affect the cost of eggs. We've got wars in the Middle East and threats of wars, rumors and rumors of wars, which may affect energy prices. And we're heading into the cold part of the year, so we have to keep an eye on that. And there's never going to be a time that we're going to be able to look at this and go, gosh, I know for an absolute fact I need to wait until rates come down, because we don't know how much higher housing prices will go. Maybe they will decrease. Maybe rates won't go down. So the question you have to ask yourself is, hello, I'm Delbridge of Benchmark Realty, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. If you are currently unrepresented and would like to know how to compare up to 3 properties side by side and room by room, then go over to my new YouTube channel, CallDelToSell. That's 1 L and Del, no spaces. Watch the demo on Real Scout, and then call me and we'll set up your exclusive ad-free account today. Well, let's look at what we did last week, 9/27/24. We had 23,036 in the opportunities. Now that includes the coming soons and what's actually able to tour. We had 4127, and that increased slightly in the contracts being held on to, but still showing. And the ratio remained the same as it had for 9 weeks in a row, so not much change there. This week, 10/4 of 24, we have 24,125. That's up over the previous week. And we see that we have 4121, which is exactly 6 less than we had last week in the under contracts, still showing. But the ratio between them did tick down for the first time in 9 weeks. So in the 10th week, we see it drop down to 17%. So we're seeing a little bit more inventory, a little bit more opportunity compared to the ones that have contracts, and they're kind of holding on to them in case they were to fall through. And I hope to see you next week.